Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopidana Balaba Grivardari Jaya Grivardari Gopidana Balaba Grivardari Jaya Grivardari Sodanandana Prahladananda Ranjana Jaya Prahladananda Ranjana Sodanandana Prahladananda Ranjana Jaya Prahladananda Ranjana Yamuna Tiravarachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Yamuna Tiravarachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopidana Balaba Grivardari Jaya Grivardari Gopidana Balaba Grivardari Jaya Grivardari Gopi Jana Vallabha Grivardhari Jaya Grivardhari. Soranandana Rajadana Ranjana Jaya Rajadana Ranjana. Soranandana Radhadana Ranjana Jaya Radhadana Ranjana. Yamuna Tiravarachari Jaya Kunja Bihari. Yamuna Tiravarachari Jaya Kunja Bihari. Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Brahmahang Subharvidakshari Asadhara Sadhu Shri Srimad is the Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Harival. Glories to the sound devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Kauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatya Desatarna. Om Agana Timarandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shigaro Shri Uttapada Kamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Vrijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Sakans Vitams Cha. Hey Krishna Karna Sindho Dinabando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prashubhanu Siddha Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakapa Trivyascha Kripa Sinubhyevacha Patidanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 17. Maharaj, Prithu becomes angry at the earth. Text number 10 to 11, of which 11 is written on the board. Tano Bhavan Ihatu Ratavenam Dudarditanam Naradeva Deva Yavananakshyamaha Ujjitorja Vartapatis Tvam Kila Lokapala Tano Bhavan Ihatu Ratavenam Dudarditanam Naradeva Deva Yavananakshamaha Ujjitorja Vartapatis Tvam Kila Lokapala. Ladies, the verse 10 is Vayam Rajan Jaharena Bitapa Vayam Rajan Jatarana Bitapta Yatagnina Kotarastena Vrikshaha Tvam Adyayata Sharanam Sharanyam Yaksadito Vriti Karak Patirnaha Vayam. We. I'll just skip over here. Therefore, na to us, Bhavan, Your Majesty, Hatu, please try, Pratave, to give, Anam, food grains. Shuddha, with hunger. Arditanam, suffering. Nara Deva Deva, O Supreme Master of all kings. Yavat, not. Yavat, na, least. Nakshaya, nakshamahe, we will perish. Ujita, being bereft of. Orja, food grains. Varta, of occupational engagements. Shower, Tvam, you. Kila, indeed. Lokapala, protector of the citizens. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O King, just as a tree with fire burning in the hollow of the trunk gradually dries up, we are drying up due to the fire of hunger in our stomachs. You are the protector of surrendered souls, and you have been appointed to give employment to us. Therefore, we have all come to you for protection. You are not only a king, but the incarnation of God as well. Indeed, you are the king of all kings. You can give us all kinds of occupational engagements. You are the master of our livelihood. Therefore, O King of all kings, please arrange to satisfy our hunger by the proper distribution of food grains. Please take care of us, lest we soon die for want of food. Purport: is the duty of the king to see that everyone in the social orders, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, is fully employed in the state, just as it is the duty of the Brahmanas to elect a proper king. It is the duty of the king to see that all the Varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, are fully engaged in their respective occupational duties. It is here indicated that although the people were allowed to perform their duties, they were still unemployed. Although they were not lazy, they still could not produce sufficient food to satisfy their hunger. When the people are perplexed in this way, they should approach the head of government, and the president or king should take immediate action to mitigate the distress of the people. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Dharamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskyatyade Siddhartha. Krishna consciousness is not impractical, but we should understand what is actually practical. The Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Anad bhavati bhutani parjana anasambhava jagnat bhavati parjanyo jagna karma samudbhavan. That all living entities subsist on food grains, which are produced from rain, and rain comes from sacrifice. And sacrifice is born of prescribed duties. Thus, the all-pervading transcendence is situated in acts of sacrifice. In other words, our real necessities of life are to get proper food. That's the first necessity. Just like Dhruva Maharaj, he gradually gave up food by only at first eating some kapita fruit every 3 days, and then gradually he reduces eating to eating only leaves that fell from the tree every 6 days. And also, and eventually only drinking a little water every 9th day. Finally, he gave up eating, and he only took a breath of air every 12 days. Then after that, he fasted from air. So most of us, we can try and fast for a day on, say, Nilajala Ekadasi, from food and water, but I don't think there's anyone here who can fast for a whole day from breathing. That's even more austere. And what to speak of giving up breathing entirely and then standing on one leg. So these are necessities of life. Clean air, clean water, healthy food. And without those necessities, then one will simply be hankering for those material objects. And if one is hankering for such material objects, it is not possible to concentrate the mind upon Krishna. Therefore, simultaneously with trying to cultivate Krishna consciousness, we're trying to reduce the necessities of life, but that doesn't mean to the point that it causes a disturbance. In other words, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasi dehinam rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishva nivartate. The embodied soul, he can be restricted from sense objects, although that taste for sense objects remains, but ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, then one actually becomes fixed in knowledge. Evam bude param budva sam samvyatmanamatmana jehi shatru mahavaho kamarupam darashadam. Knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, one should control the lower self by the higher, and thus by spiritual strength, conquer the sensational enemy known as lust. In other words, when the soul takes shelter of Krishna, then Krishna takes charge of the activities of this body and mind, and gives the intelligence by which one is able to make spiritual advancement. And when one is taking shelter of materialistic false ego, then one acquires materialistic intelligence, and one's desires become focused on gratifying the subtle and gross material desires. And one mistakenly thinks that the activities of the body and the mind and the intelligence are actually one's own activities. So that's called illusion. One falls under the spell of illusion. And not only one falls under the spell of illusion, but even, as Krishna says, evam parvarti tam chakram, nanuvarti tihaya, agayur indriyaramo, mokam partas the jivati. A person who doesn't perform the prescribed sacrifice simply lives a life of sin. For a person who lives a life of sin, his life is certainly lived in vain. In other words, not only one's necessities of life will gradually be reduced as one runs out of one's past pious credit, then one will also have to suffer the reactions from one's activities. Here we find that the citizens, they're engaged in occupational duties, and yet still they're not getting the necessities of life. The occupational duties, as we know, are Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. But it is not simply designations. They're meant for cooperation. Just like the hand doesn't think, I am hand, the rest of the body should surrender to me. Or the head doesn't think, I'm the head, I'm the best on the body, I can torch it or do without the other parts of the body. No, there's a sense of they're working together and cooperating. The head doesn't think that the hand is useless, or the legs are useless, or the stomach is useless. They're all meant for cooperation. Similarly, in the activities of this material world, one is assigned by the laws of nature a certain material body and that material body has a certain duty. And that duty culminates in the cooperation for, number one, producing the necessities of life with a minimum amount of effort. Although the scientists are trying to, by their speculation, trying to change how we get the necessities of life by introducing all kinds of so-called technological advancement, like genetically modified food. But these things are actually, as Krishna says, etam drishtim avashtabhya nashtatmanana buddhaya. Shaye karma. Etam drishtim avashtabhya nashtatmanana buddhaya. Pravanyukra karmana shaye jagato hita. Following such conclusions, that is, atheistic conclusions, and lost to themselves, the demoniac, they create horrible, unbeneficial works which are meant to destroy the world. Because they don't recognize the aspect of sacrifice to Vishnu, therefore they're creating these horrible so-called technological advances, which are actually causing suffering, ill health, and scarcity throughout the whole world. And although practically everyone suffers because of this, some few people so-called profit from it. But actually there's no profit in having others suffering. In any case, the material nature works systematically, and if we follow the system of sacrifice, then the result is we get our necessities of life. Of course, because people don't have the higher taste of Krishna consciousness, they imagine that if they gratify their senses more, then that is called happiness. But Krishna says, Achintyam aparayam cha pralayantam upashitya ka pavoga paramam etavam iti nischitya asha pasha shuterabada kama krota parayana ihanti kama bogartan anyaye nartha sanshaya. That they believe that to gratify the senses unto the end of life is the prime necessity of human civilization, and therefore there can be no measurement for their anxieties. Being bound by hundreds and thousands of desires, they secure money by illegal means for sense gratification. But here, as I said, the citizens, apparently they're performing their prescribed duty, which includes sacrifice to Vishnu, and yet they're not getting the necessities of life. So therefore they're approaching the proper person to rectify the situation. They didn't have protests, write petitions. They were not so fools to think that the government was going to be able to help them by some kind of petition. As Prabhupada used to say, the government, the politicians, they promise so many things, get elected, but after they get elected, they can't fulfill any of their promises. Because they're actually not in control of anything. Just like Prabhupada said, in some communist country, the communists came and they said, "My dear citizens, do you want bread?" And they said, "Yes, my dear communist friends, we want bread." So go to your church and you can pray for bread. "Dear Lord, give us our daily bread." So all the citizens, they went to the church and they prayed, "Oh Lord, please give us our daily bread." But there's no bread coming. So they came outside and the communists said, "Well, my dear friends, did you get your bread?" "No, dear communist friends, there was no bread." "So pray to us. See what happens." So they said, "Oh, dear communist friends, please give us our daily bread." So then the communists, they called for trucks of bread to come and distribute them to the people. And then the communists said, "My dear fellows, comrades, tell us, who is better? Is your God better or we are better?" "Oh, dear communist friends, You are better because you give us our daily bread. Prabhupada said, if I was there, I'd say, you rascals, you say you're giving us our daily bread, but where do you get the bread from? So they also had to rely upon the Supreme Lord, and they had to rely upon rain in order to get the bread that they were distributing to the poor villages. So ultimately, although it may be that we think we're getting our necessities of life from some other source, but ultimately our necessities of life come by sacrifice, and that sacrifice produces rain in the proper quantity at the proper time so that we can get our grains, and from the grains we can obtain the necessities of life. But when the citizens are performing sacrifice and there's no result, they approach the proper person, the Kshatriya. Surya Teja Driti Daksha Yude Chapipalayana Dhanam Ishvara Bhavascha Shatra Karma Sabhavajam. So it's the duty of the Kshatriya to give protection. Surya, heroism, Tejas, power. You can't be a Kshatriya and have no power. The Kshatriyas used to go and with some sword fight against a tiger. Nowadays, the politicians, if they see a cat in the street, they get nervous. They can't, or as one of our devotees was running for mayor in Atlanta, Prahladananda, and during the debate, he was asked a live television debate. The incumbent, the person who was the mayor at that time, or his opponent who was running for the mayor, got on and he was speaking his platform to help the citizens of Atlanta. But during his interview, televised interview, he was smoking a cigarette. When Bhagavatam got on the television to give his side of the story, he said, how can you elect this person as your mayor? The mayor is supposed to protect you, but we can see he's smoking cigarettes. And everyone knows cigarette smoking is dangerous, is not good for you. So he can't even protect himself from himself. So how can he protect the citizens? Because people are fools and rascals nowadays, so they andaya tandira upagayamanas tepisha tantra urudami vada. They don't know that the goal of life, nitevidu swargati timhi Vishnu, they don't know that the goal of life is to obtain Vishnu. Garashya gebahya artha manina. They take something completely insignificant as very important. Some politician vows that he's going to make sure that everyone has free Wi-Fi access. And everyone says, oh, this is the man to elect. When Prabhupada was here, there was one politician, or as Prabhupada mentions, in India, people are approaching the politician and saying, we're starving, please give us our food. And the politician says, don't worry, next week we'll give you another channel on television. They can eat their television when the food runs out. But people don't know what is actually necessary. And therefore they waste their time and energy running after illusory objects. But the actually objects that are necessary are the basic necessities of life. And the king is responsible, a real king, a real administrator is responsible to see that those necessities of life are supplied to the citizens. As I said in the Krishna book, when there was one Brahmin in Dwarka, and his son died prematurely. And one son after another died prematurely, and the Brahmin went before the gates of the king Ugrasena and cursed the king, that in the presence of a father, the son is dying, there must be some fault on the king. And Prabhupada writes that the kings previously in the Vedic times were so responsible that if the weather was bad, it would be blamed on the king. What to speak of his son dying in the presence of his father? Because these things are not by accident. Evam prabdam, emam urjarshya vidu, sakalene ha mahata yogo nashta parandapa. That if there is some problem in the society, it's because the citizens are not following the Vedic process. They're not engaged in proper sacrifice. And generally they're not engaged in proper sacrifice because the knowledge of Krishna consciousness is not being distributed. And the knowledge of Krishna consciousness is not being distributed because all kinds of nonsense knowledge is being distributed, because instead of the Kshatriyas and the Brahmins being control of the society, Shudras and a few cunning so-called Vaishyas are running the society and distributing propaganda for economic development in order to get sense gratification. But there's no knowledge of real Dharma, and there's no understanding that the goal of life is liberation from material entanglement. Therefore, if there's some irregularity in the society, the king would be held responsible for not properly protecting the Brahmins especially, and giving them all assistance for propagating Vedic knowledge and Krishna consciousness. But in this case, King Prithu is following the reign of Vena, and obviously Vena was a sinful person, and he had stopped sacrifice, and therefore this is undoubtedly the root of all the different problems that the citizens were facing. But because now there was a real Kshatriya in the realm as the king, therefore the citizens approached him to alleviate their distress, and ultimately the king is obliged to do that so that the citizens can have a peaceful mind and therefore be able to hear the Vedic knowledge and eventually make progress towards Krishna consciousness. We find that Prithu Maharaj immediately takes action. He doesn't call for a meeting of all the ministers and sit around and talk for 5 years about what we're supposed to be doing, what we should do, and then takes bribes from the citizens in case someone actually wants something done. He doesn't go on television and say, don't worry about the food, we're going to give you another channel on television. Just keep me in office and everything's cool. No, he immediately took action and did what was necessary to actually provide the necessities of life for the people in general. So this is a real king. Unfortunately, people don't know what a real king is. They don't know what what their goal of life is. They don't know how to achieve it, nor are they interested in finding these things out. They're simply interested in being provided with more and more easy money for easy sense gratification, for an easy road to hell. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? Yes. Yagna Sankirtana Prayara Yanti Hi Sumedasa. Those who have some brains left, they'll chant Hare Krishna. They'll perform some sacrifice, and by such sacrifice the demigods will be pleased, and therefore the rain will come And if we do our occupational duties, then we'll be able to get our food grains. But to expect rain to come without performing Sankirtan Jaga is just an illusion. Of course, rain will come so much that it'll flood Delhi, it'll be underwater, or there won't be any rain for years here. So Ati Drishti or Alpa Drishti, Tascha Nudinam Dharamyam Sattvam Socham Daya Shama Kalena Balila Rajan Nakshantyayor Balam Smriti. Day after day, because of neglect of religion, therefore all kinds of cleanliness and tolerance, mercy, Tasyanudinam Dharmam, Sattvam, Socham, truthfulness, these will gradually disappear by the strong force of Kali Yuga. Therefore, their bodily strength and memory will also disappear. So unless there is sacrifice being made, specifically chanting Hare Krishna, then there'll be necessities everywhere. Now we think that there's necessities, but Prabhupada said the time will come, you may have $1 million, but you won't be able to purchase a carrot. You may be able to purchase a picture of a carrot. Hopefully the paper is edible that you purchase the carrot on, but there won't be any carrot to purchase. You can purchase a mango, but there'll only be skin and the seed. There won't be anything inside the mango. So things are bad, and without sacrifice, they'll get worse. But with sacrifice, Prabhupada said, then even Kali Yuga can be made to be just like Satya Yuga. Yes.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Maharaj, for your wonderful class. Maharaj, we see many countries like China and some other countries like this, they are progressing materially, although there is no such sacrifice and there is no following of any dharma also. So how do we understand this, Maharaj?
Well, I don't think they're progressing materially. I mean, they have so many factories, the air quality is very poor. So if you can't breathe air, how are you progressing materially? If I say I'm going to give you $100 billion, but you can't breathe anymore. There won't be any food for you to eat for the next 3 years, and there won't be any water. But you can look at your $1 billion, $100 billion. Think of how rich you are. So, if there's not good air, there's not clean water, there's not fresh sattvic food, then where is the progression? If people are not living harmoniously with one another, they don't feel protected, then where is there any progress? It's simply imagination. They may, in their computers, have ones and so many zeros after it, but ultimately it's useless without those things. Anything else? Yes.
In today's situation, it seems like very difficult for introducing this Varnashram Dharma and a real Kshatriya should rule. Then another place in Bhagavatam, Prabhupada writes that if everyone becomes Krishna conscious, then we don't require actually this division of Varnashram. And yet another place, when somebody asked Prabhupada, would you like to become the President of America? Then he told, no, I would like to become the spiritual master of the President of America. So at one place we are trying to introduce this Varnashram, and at the other end we are trying to, it becomes contradictory in that sense.
Well, I think everything comes in stages. There's no question of actually introducing Varnashram unless we have people to introduce it to. Our real mission presently is preaching Krishna consciousness so that people will develop enough brains to chant Hare Krishna. Because Varnashram in this age will not be very effective without the chanting Hare Krishna, because that is the Yuga Dharma. There won't be any other Yuga Dharma except for the holy names. Therefore, our real mission is preaching, and when we preach to enough people and they accept it to some degree, when there's millions and millions of people accepting Krishna consciousness as the authority, then we can introduce Varnashram, engage people accordingly in order to produce food and to live a regulated life. But right now, Varnashram, it may be helpful for us to at least have some farms where we can get food. But then again, if people are not Krishna conscious, if there's disturbance in the society, we may have a farm with food, but that doesn't mean people won't come and take the food from us anyhow. So without making a substantial number of people at least aware of Krishna and serious about making some advancement, then there's no sense of establishing Varnashram, because who's going to follow it? Yeah, of course. You have to have people, if they don't understand the purpose of life, then we can go on chanting Hare Krishna forever, but people will think they won't be able to, and we can go on chanting Hare Krishna, but we don't know the practical purpose, how to live practically ourselves, and if we don't introduce that practical lifestyle to others, then we're just wasting our time. But people won't follow us unless we have some example, and at the same time, we know how to engage people properly, and we know what the goal of life is. We ourselves can establish farm communities, but if we're not chanting Hare Krishna and engage in hearing and chanting, we'll simply have a farm of hippies. We'll have an animal farm rather than a Varnashram farm. So the power of the holy name, the chanting Hare Krishna, and the 5 powerful processes, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, worshiping the deities, serving the devotees, making the atmosphere spiritual, that has to go on simultaneously in our so-called Varnashram Dharma. And then when we're powerful enough, as our example, then people may establish Varnashram and have an idea about that the purpose of life is to sacrifice for Vishnu, but they may not follow as strictly as we do. But still, they'll get the necessities of life, so that gradually they can progress. The Prabhupada is more concerned that the time will come when because people are so irregular in their habits, that there won't be any rain, proper rain, and therefore food will become so scarce that people will become so disturbed they won't be able to hear the message of the Bhagavatam. And they'll be so disturbed that they'll disturb us also. We won't be able to hear the message of the Bhagavatam. But right now we have to fully absorb ourselves in preaching, spreading Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, Varnashram won't be very meaningful, especially if we don't have any people following ourselves and understanding what the purpose of life is. Anything else? Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Grandaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande.